a party is going, people are having fun, people are talking, and then the pastor coming.
Quiet.
I've actually been to a party where I came, early, one of the few times. I came early and then everybody was chatting, having fun, and then once the pastor came in, like everybody was just like, yes sir, it just died down.
This is his father's house, and the cannot set his father's house unclean. And I know some of our pastors want to do that, but we have members that are like, pastor, that cannot be. If it happens,
there will even be an elder where you are sitting there like that and you'll say, look at your face. This person is doing this, can't you see?
You're in the church, for example, and they're doing the AGM meeting. There are questions you cannot ask as a young guy.
Why not?
You have one question.
Why not? you open it up. Why not?
What questions and why not?
Exactly.
You just do.
When your pastors and those people who are really the change makers in the church are the front, they often don't see the people that need help at the back. So if the new member comes and they need help, how can the pastor even know?
So your pastor,
my culture dictates that I talk, and Christ taught us to how to respectfully antagonize. So you respectfully antagonize.
You have not met some tough people.
No, you respectfully antagonize.
And they will respectfully tell you no.
And you respectfully get out of that.
Hi everybody, welcome to today's episode. The usual co-host, and today we're actually going to be talking about something that is very important. We'll be looking at culture, before Christ. We are all Nigerians, so we're actually going to be focusing more on Nigerian culture, but we'll make it as general as we can. We understand culture, as Nigerians, we value our culture, respect, hierarchy, and tradition. Today we're actually going to be talking about, does our culture contradict, Christ's teachings? What happens when the value clashes? How do we navigate the pool, of our cultural teaching? And yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I like to go direct when we start. AY, straight away, do you think our culture as Nigerian clashes with Christ's teachings?
Yes, there are certain parts of our culture that clashes with Christ's teachings. I'm a Yoruba man from the west side. So there are certain parts of the Yoruba culture that clashes with the way Christ taught us. An example is how we do naming ceremony.
Okay.
Now the putting salt in the child's mouth, the breaking of cola and all those things. Yeah, just an example.
Okay. Yeah. Are there aspects of our culture that reflect Christ's values?
I like answering his question.
Okay. No. Now you have two questions.
Okay.
Well, I agree with you. I think culture and Christ is often a battle. The simplest thing that always comes to mind is the idea that if you have to marry somebody, you have to marry somebody from the same culture or background, and your parents will say that, look, this thing is right, and you might even go as far as convincing your parents that, hey, this person is a Christian, he's going to bring up wonderful children. They're like, no, they're not of the same culture as you, so forget it, So that's where culture kind of triumphs over Christ, because you have two equally yoked people and, who are saying that they shouldn't be apart, they shouldn't be together for reasons that are beyond Christ, no Jew, no what is it?
Gentiles.
No Gentiles.
Yeah. And then the second question you asked, I didn't even remember it because I wanted to ask that question.
What aspects of our culture will actually reflect the value of Christ?
Culture. Unity.
Okay.
Unity, togetherness.
Okay.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
And sacrificial love.
Okay.
Those are things that you find within certain cultures that are reflective of Christ's own mentality or ways.
Yeah. So, every country have their way of doing things, and a lot of the times, we've had our way of doing things before the gospel came, to Africa. So, for example, we are from Nigerians. We know our history. Idol worshiping, and the missionary came, and brought Christ's teachings, and obviously there are going to be contradiction. It's not just Nigerian. Like even Colombia, wherever you are,
everywhere.
you will have ways of doing
culture.
things. Yeah, and what we want to dive in today is actually talk about where there have been clashes, and how to address it. I know AY mentioned about the naming ceremony, the sword. Those are true, but I don't think, does it clash? Does that clash, or do we, I don't know, should we, for me, when I think
is it in
of
opposition
yeah,
to Christ?
Is it in opposition, and is it still really practice,
Oh, yeah, okay, of course.
So what does salt and cola, what does that signify? What does
In Yoruba culture, when you're naming something, traditionally, they bring in all those things.
Yeah.
The culture is
Yeah.
depicts the tradition of the people and how we do things generally. And as a Christian, sometimes we. So I'll give you an example also. So there's this wedding I attended, and the wife was going to enter the father's house. His in-laws now. The wife was going to enter for the first time, and the women in the house poured water on the floor. And the lady went, "What's that?" One, the lady is not Nigerian.
Yep.
And I figured maybe the guy hasn't explained to him that they can do something like this, so you should do it. So the lady was like, "No, I'm not stepping on that.
Yeah.
I'm Christian. And I don't understand what you guys have just done.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to step on it." And the guy has to be and that's the first time the lady is entering into that house. And the women in the house thought, wow, she's already putting up opposition and stuff like that. So it took a bit of time before they could say to her and say, okay, it's the right thing. And her mom had to step in to say, this kind of thing. So, and the lady was like, "I'm not against culture. It's not, but I'm a Christian and I don't believe in that." And you know what that denotes for Yoruba is, if you step on the water, it means it's to say that you'll be entering into your husband's house with a good this. So that, even that thinking, the lady was like, "It's against my belief. I don't have to pour water on anything. This whole house, I'm in charge now. Christ is in charge," and all those things. The lady was professing her faith. And in the family, there are people who don't believe in Christ. Now that they now see somebody authoritatively saying, "Christ is here, Christ is this," it became another issue.
Were they Christians?
No.
The family?
Yeah, it is said to be a Christian family.
Okay.
But you know what I mean when I say it is said to be a Christian family? When they are practicing Christian, they are believing Christian, and they are churchgoers.
Yeah.
In the family.
But let me use your line. We are
Whenever
silent.
you shake your hand like that, nobody is safe.
You say we are silent when the Bible is silent.
Yeah.
And loud,
Loud when the Bible is loud.
Where in the Bible is that
A taboo.
said that you cannot cross a water or whatever.
But you know what it means now. So to the lady now, okay, it's like so I go to my village and then they are worshiping Oshun River. And they say every house in the place should put a stick in front of their house.
Yeah.
If I do that for some Christian, and this has happened before, I mean, if I put a stick in front of my house, am I now saying I'm putting my house under the covering of Oshun? I'm a Christian. When God told the children of Israel to mark their house, He didn't tell the Egyptians, right? And the spirit of death did what. So now that the Oshun people are now raising this altar and saying, put a stick in front of your house or put a leaf because the Oshun festival is being done, culture says do it.
Well,
Christ, if I do it, do you understand where his class now comes in? If I do it and my pastor comes around and see, why do you have leave? And I start explaining, but the culture says we should do it. then that also turns to give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I don't want those conversation comes in.
Okay,
So that's what I'm saying.
Good point. And I think when you talk about Oshun, I think we are now moving to another religion culture. Like, because putting that stick is
religious.
It's religious, right? It's religious, and it could come into culture. But what we are talking here also now is
a way of life.
Yeah, way of life that is not necessarily linked to a particular religion. So, for example, hierarchy and respect is big. For example, we can say it's more of a cultural thing in Nigeria, Africa, compared to maybe a Caucasian, environment. So, for example, you can go to a Caucasian house and the elder man, the guy just say, "Hello, how you doing?"
Hi, mate.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, John.
From upstairs.
Hi, John.
From upstairs. But, Olaide, you know what will happen. You know what will happen. You know what will happen to you as a 30 years old, 40 years old. And the elderly man came and just said, "How you doing, bro?" What would happen to you?
If an elderly man came to me and just
said, Nigerian elderly man.
I wouldn't think it's Nigerian.
If you were to do that, what would your parents do to you?
I'd rather be alive. I'll unalive myself. No, my parents.
Okay, so we are big on that, on hierarchy respect. Do you think we go too far at times? And do you think that affects our Christian growth? When we, let's take example now, like, the hierarchy, the respect, the authoritarian. Do you think, we go too far in our migrant churches? And do you think that affects our growth and discipleship within the church?
Absolutely. I think it's also one of the pain points of being a Christian in today's generation, especially for migrant churches. Yeah. We take it too far in the aspect that, a lot of conversations at many churches that, respect is not earned, it's given. A lot of people who are older than us, who are thought to be wiser, and it's not to say they're not wiser, but who are thought to be wiser, we automatically give respect to the form of we don't protest, we don't question, we don't step out of line, and it's because of that very same reason we're even having this conversation or having this forum today, because we don't want to offend, it's a very extensive matter, and part of it is this thing. Like, I've always had issues with the idea of, we call certain people daddy, mommy, bro, sis. See, I don't mind doing it, but I don't feel like if people did it voluntarily, it's fine. But when people do it because culture has dictated you to do that, I don't think that's correct. Because forget about whether it's right or wrong. Let's look at it practically. I always tell my wife, like, when I go to all these parties and stuff like that, and you have multiple daddies and mommies, and you have your own daddy and mommy, and you say, "Daddy," should I call somebody by their first name before they recognize who I'm talking about? No, sorry, you daddy, or that daddy, everybody will turn, mommy.
Well.
See, my dad is actually the one that has helped me realize, like, my dad is not fully the type of person that, you start calling even your uncles by their first name.
You won't have,
Again, I want to be alive. But, he's also the one that says, it's alright to be calling those who are already like uncle, auntie. Like, it's not just migrant churches that do that. A lot of even Caucasian churches, or those that are not migrant, they will call their brothers and sisters brother, sister, this and that, which is no problem. But it's almost like it's like within our migrant churches, it's like demanded you give them that correct terminology. And I find myself sometimes
if daddy and mommy said something, that is contrary to your view, how would you feel to be able to say, sorry, that like, I actually do not agree with that point. And I think that's where it comes into play, right? Because sometimes the hierarchy, the respect is so it's so much that if you are being taught a certain view, it's almost like you can't correct it. You can't defend it. You must just accept it because it's coming from someone.
Do you know the problem? Do you know the biggest problem? the way that it has, I won't say destroyed the church, but the way that it has affected the church today is now we are incompatible with building relationships with people that are not the same age. I cannot
absolutely.
build a relationship with my pastors, with people who are older than me, because as soon as I have to say sir, ma, it means that I can't see you, I can't talk as friends, because I will always be talking to you in the manner of somebody who is so far grown up away from me. Instead of when I talk to you, it's like, how are you doing? Like, it's like, and I'll give you an example. My pastor, he's one of the few people I know that, from a position of leadership, he talks to me as if we catch up every day. I will come to him and I'm a culture boy that was brought up in culture, so it's instilled within me. I'll come up to him, I'll show him due respect. Sometimes you don't even shake their hand, you just like, that's how some of us Nigerians do. My pastor will just say, like, they come here, give me a big hug, shake my hand, give me a fist bump, and I'm like, when he first did it, I was like, what's going on here? But so that's one way I think culture has reduced the ability for us to create relationships and build a rapport with each other.
So I probably want to say that what we are saying here, like, Christ does not teach us not to have respect.
Of course not.
To our elders. What do you have to say about that, AY? Like, how do you like hold the value of the respect that Christ is teaching, and then to the point where it causes barriers? Do you think like our cultural respect could cause barriers to our growth as Christian, or is it like our interpretation? Because I think what Lide is saying is true, but at the same time we also still need to respect, isn't it? So it's finding that balance.
One of the things I think culture does is placing some people over the affairs of your life.
Okay.
It generally just places some people over the affairs of your life, and you have to have grown to a certain level, and during that growing phase, they are passing information and instructions to you that you are adhering to that is building a level of trust. It gets to a point in time where going against their views or their world views of life becomes as though you're becoming obstinate or you're becoming antagonistic. Now, you have to have grown to a level where you've grown in Christ to know that this is the way, the truth, and the light. And you're solely involved, your sole purpose is, I'm going to follow this. So that when they tell you things that are contrary, you're able to stand your feet. Because you also know, because culture has placed those people over the affairs of your life, there are consequences that comes with you becoming obstinate. So because culture does that, sometimes it clashes. So that is the part that that is like culture and Christ. Sometimes definitely you still have to afford them respect. So I will say, when you get to that point where culture is detecting something and Christ is detecting something, wisdom should play.
So for example, for me, one of the things I've always thought of is the issue of discipleship. Discipleship is so important in our growth. You could also say, someone that keeps you accountable. Usually, not all the time. Again, now this is also the issue that could you have someone younger discipling
somebody older?
I've not seen. Well, it's possible, but it's hard. Okay, but to go back to my actual original point, usually it's maybe someone older in faith, is discipling someone younger. Okay.
Can I say
one of the things, let me finish. One of the things that happens is, for example, simple as a phone call. Okay. Our culture usually pushes that, like, if you're the younger one in the relationship, you are the one to you should be the one. How can someone younger, how can someone older be following, but in Christendom, if you're actually discipling someone, you should be calling them, you should be like checking their welfare. But I've noticed that if you want to keep a relationship with your discipler or someone that you see as spiritual, it's expected in a way culturally that you should be the one keeping in touch.
That is so.
That is a problem,
It's
isn't it?
diametrically opposed to being a Christian.
Yeah, so
Because
this is one of the clash that we have
again,
now.
it goes back to one of our previous episodes where we talked about the idea that as leaders we should humble ourselves.
Yeah.
Like not humble ourselves before people, but humble ourselves so that we can be role models, so that people can respect us and know that this person is not highly or exalted, but he's humbled himself before God, and this is my role model. But if you don't humble yourself, and not just humble yourself, the idea of humbling yourself means that you don't see anybody as lower than you or anybody higher than you, but you see a brother and sister in Christ. And means that if this person has not contacted me, I'm not going to let culture dictate when that person contacts me. I will contact them first.
And that takes some level of humility, right?
Honestly, you have to be humble.
Which will clash
with what
how we are brought up.
culture,
Because
yes.
it's also the same thing. You see an elderly person in church, someone younger. Maybe they are even busy. It's not that they know. After I told someone, they was like, this person, they don't even greet you. They don't. And I think it puts a lot of pressure on younger Christians. Because you have to live in a cultural way, and what is of a danger now is that if you continue in that path, when you grow up,
you'll be like that.
You will be like that. So when I was part of the children department, I teach the younger one. I try to, I have to be conscious to not go that path. Of you demanding respect, authority, or you cannot talk back to me, you cannot do this to me. Which sometimes a child talking back to you is them having a contrary view, which is important to actually it's important for them to have, for them to be able to grow in Christ. So this is the problem that we have. That this I guess you could say it's subtle, but it can hinder growth, as Christians. So anyway, how can Christians honor their culture without compromising their faith? If you have a disciple that is older than you, you probably want to, be in touch more. But if they are not reaching out to you, and it will cause a fraction in relationship, isn't it? The discipling cannot go for as long as possible, because if this person is expecting me to reach out and then I'm the one reaching out, there will always be a fracture. So how do we address this?
Okay. I would say, once that type of arrangement is made, there should be what I can call as terms of agreement. How do we communicate? Because you have to make it apparent to the person that culture is a thing now that will affect this relationship if we don't set certain boundaries and set certain expectations for one another. So you find a time to catch up. Know that there's a catch-up time. So a catch-up time would literally connote that doesn't dictate whoever calls. It's our catch-up time. If I'm the one calling, we're good. If you're the one calling, we're good. So we knocked out that expectation of culture that says the younger one should be the one calling the older person. Right?
I don't even know how it works in evangelism. How do you evangelize? Because if you are somebody who's evangelizing, you're most likely older than most people. How do you evangelize if you're waiting for somebody to call you? You evangelize to somebody and says, yes, I like what you're saying, I want to learn more, and then you're waiting for them to call you. but you know what our culture is. There are many things.
Also, it's even in church, in church, if you don't go and you are expected to be the one to go and greet first.
The funny thing is that actually in some churches, if you are reaching out to people who are non-migrants or Caucasian or of different culture than your own culture, you will actually go and reach out to them. But when it comes to people of your own culture, you will actually wait for them. And I think it's it's just this innate
let me tell you a story. Well, there's this story that I heard. There was this story that I heard of these, both Nigerian and they were in diaspora in university setting. Okay, and if you will go to university in Nigeria and in Australia, it's completely different. Very, very different. So, in diaspora, you can call your professor name, by their name. You can just, go and greet them casually. And this Nigerian professor, obviously he lives in that system. That's what he's
Used to.
He's used to. But then immediately you had a Nigerian student, and that Nigerian student wants to try something like he called him on the side. He said, if you see what they are calling, if you try that, if you try it, and straight away. So you just go back to what you are saying. That like it's almost like once we see ourselves, that culture comes back, you know.
But it means that it's not like we don't know how to act in accordance with the way the Bible has taught us, because we act like that with other people. Yeah. So is it like one of those things when it comes to people of your own culture, or maybe people of your own tribe? You know, it's like that thing where people say that, oh, if you go to some African nations, you find that like if a white person does something, people of non-white cultures, they tend to glorify these white people and say, wow, look at what he's doing. This guy, he looks nice and everything. But when it comes to people, you deny your own people. You know, you denigrate your own people, but you uplift white people, you know. So I think sometimes it can even be that. I mean, there's culture in it, but it seems like maybe there's another thing in there. But it's the heart of it is still culture. We're still letting the culture dictate that which is meant to be of Christ, you know. And I don't know how you get to that age of being a Christian and you're still like, do you understand what I'm saying? You're at an age where people are looking up to you, you have spiritual maturity, and you're still acting like you're somebody who's not who doesn't follow the ways of Christ. How have you got to that age and still acting like that? I actually don't understand. I don't understand, because it's like it's you know what it is? You're selectively choosing when you want to follow God, and then other times when you don't want to follow God. It's as simple as that.
I don't think, well, where you ended it is where I have an issue. It's sometimes say wisdom. It's not that you're trying to say, you know, sometimes when you're in Rome, you behave like Romans. Not necessarily giving in to the Roman way, but you just allow for peace. So if we go back to the example of if I have to be the one to call, the aim is that this person gets discipled and they end up becoming a follower of Christ. If I'm looking at the aim, I'm not thinking of who is calling. So that aspect is knocked out. So those are the things you just, like that lecturer now that said that to that boy. If I was in the shoe of the students, I would accord the respect. Because now the person has called my attention to it. Like, I'm expecting you to behave this way. Terms and condition has now been set. Now, if I now choose to, no, we are in Australia, and I'm not going to behave like that to you, I'm going to behave like one, like the other students.
I have a problem with that now, because if we come to church setting, and the same thing is said of you, of that you should need to follow this path, would you say that since you have laid out the terms and conditions now, I will follow it, even if
you know, if we are in the church, for example, and they're doing the AGM meeting, there are questions you cannot ask as a young guy.
Why not?
What question?
Why not? We've opened it up. Why not?
What questions and why not?
You just do, like,
no, but tell us one.
Our training tells
us. They say that it's the young
yeah.
ones. Let me just. It's the young ones that is to clean the church and wash the toilet. Only the younger ones from this age to this age.
That will be washing the toilet, and you want to now say why?
Yeah.
That's a good one. Now, how do you protest that?
Wait, is that?
Or you've heard, I've been in churches and they said, okay, woman cannot preach.
Yes.
No, that one is not technically culture.
No, woman.
No, people.
Where?
There's a disagreement over where that is.
Women cannot. Women
can come from the angle of
where
Christian Christ culture.
Cross culture where? Where did Christ say? Where did Christ say? Women
no, it's not only where did Christ say, because we're saying that we're taking authority from Paul and other disciples, because there's a reason why Paul said, see, when, like we say, when we read the Bible, we read it in context, in the culture. We're not saying that it's right or wrong. We're simply saying that if somebody were to make that point, it's not because of culture alone. There's a biblical context to which they could bring that up. But we're talking about purely just culture. It's not. See, what we just said is somebody could make a case even if they're wrong, but culture it's non-biblical. There are some things in culture that's non-biblical, but we superseded it above.
And bring it into, okay, fine. I get what you guys are saying. Anyway.
Because what you're saying is once there is terms and condition, it's fine. Let's just go on with it.
What I'm saying is sometimes there are times where you
if
know that
I call you now and says, this is the term, this is what we do here, even though it's clearly not what Christ is saying. How would you contradict that? Would you?
I will talk because my culture dictates that I talk, and Christ taught us to how to respectfully antagonize.
Yeah.
So you respectfully antagonize.
Yeah, I've not met some tough people.
No, you respectfully antagonize, and because
they respectfully tell you no,
and you respectfully get out of that place. you see, I'm saying I understand what, and this is. You know what culture has done to us as a church. The youth are not connecting to the elders. The elders are not connecting to the youth. There's the age differentiation and all those things that happen in the congregations when we find ourselves. Sometimes you're doing some celebrations in the church. There's some things, some events that the youth cannot relate to. They can't relate to these things, and they're finding it hard to say something because the culture says whatever the elder says is the right thing. Is the right thing. You understand? And you check in the Bible, well, there was a time Jesus was young and he was able to talk. Right? Those are the things. The Christ does, when they are chasing children away from him, he said, no, allow them. Allow them to talk. Those are the things. When clearly people are not allowing you do things in line with how Christ has, so you should be able to say no. It's not.
So if we look at the Bible, when Jesus was here on earth, there were ways of doing things. So, for example, the Jews, they were not allowed to talk to the Samaritans.
Yeah.
A Jewish man is also not allowed to talk to a woman publicly anyway. When Jesus
was here,
when he talked to the Samaritan woman, he broke two cultural to the point that when the disciples came, they actually said, Master, what are you doing?
Yes.
It's like they are rebuking Christ, Like, how can you be doing such a thing? One, this person is a Samaritan.
Two, is a woman.
She's also a woman. So, it shows that, we must be bold, right? And what I said, respectfully, I think probably one of the biggest challenge we have is that people go about this in a very, very rude way.
Exactly. Okay. Because you want to prove a point that I'm not going to follow that thing, and then
it's an extreme. I think a lot of times we just sit there and to be honest, I'll admit it too. A lot of times we just, in order not to cause issue, let me just go with it, whatever is being, even though we know that something is wrong here. And the other extreme is whereby you rebel, you don't do respect. But I think, there's a balanced line whereby we have to be bold and we have to say, look, I do not agree with this, and I think we should not be doing this. What are other things, that are within our church that we feel that it's cultural and we need to respectfully address? So we've talked about hierarchy, we've talked about, you've talked about daddy, mommy. We've talked about, not being able to
express yourself,
express your views.
Yeah.
Even if an adult, says
it's wrong. Yeah.
You should be able to. What are other things that are there that are ingrained?
Culture also dictates that whoever is oldest should be the leader. No. Okay. Christ did not tell us. Christ taught us whoever is more spiritually, and then whoever God chooses, you have to respect. And the office is what you respect. Not the person then takes whatever the office privileges give the person. You just need to then respect it. Culture says no in leadership. The way culture dictates leadership is different from the way Christ dictates leadership. There are things culture says leaders should take and gather. Christ says leaders should give and give themselves.
Yeah.
You serve. He who is to be the leader among you must be servant. Yeah.
You know what? You know,
So those
talking
are
about,
things.
talking
Yeah.
about this, like I'll come to you next.
Yeah.
You know, I just remember, having church programs, and this might be controversial. Like
that's what we like.
after conferences, after things like that, you usually see, the leaders, the people, maybe an international speaker, whatever, they go upstairs to a dedicated room, with abundant food.
It's like you just read my mind.
It's wine. And then as a young person, you're like, that's who I want to be. But then,
What are you guys talking about?
every audience, like everyone else, like just, you're on your own, like you still be taken care of. But you know what I just remember, like as we were talking, when Christ, fed 5,000,
Yes.
women and children, like, what was the role of the disciples?
To help feed everybody,
Yeah,
help
Christ
distribute.
gave those food to those disciples, and then they went to feed, the
Doing
others.
that.
So
the
it's
disciples served as the ushers, right?
yeah, they serve as the ushers. Okay.
Yeah.
So do we still have that in our days,
Yeah,
or do you think?
No, I think we still have it, but I think I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it because this is just my view.
Yeah.
My view is that I think if you have special guests and
Yeah.
people who may have dedicated time to come over, then it's more of an honorary gift or an honorary, like just honoring them for the time spent. So you might just take them, to the side and just. But if it's like one of those things where people at your church like they're hungry and pastor is eating like very lavish bread and he's up there, he finished half the drink and just threw it in the bin, and people hasn't drank yet. I'll have a massive problem.
Are leaders meant to serve?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah,
But
so-
at the same time, it doesn't mean that they can't receive
Some honor and
yes,
and-
absolutely.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
most
yeah.
of the time, at least from my perspective, that honor that's usually given to them, it's by the congregation themselves that honor the pastors. It's not the pastor
they're
saying,
not the
"I
one
must-"
demanding it. I think
Yes.
it's a problem when
It's now being
excessive
demanded.
demanding.
Yeah. But even sometimes, like even those of us in the church, we sometimes can overdo it because, like, okay, for example, when they say that pastor is coming today, and like say somebody wants to say somebody who comes to the church new for the first time, comes to the church and wants to sit at the front row, but you say no, that is for the pastor.
Yeah.
That is culturally embedded within us to say that the pastor must sit at the front.
Why is that?
Yeah?
Why is that?
But that's what I'm wondering.
Easy access to the altar.
It's organization.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. No,
It's
but
just down, I just say it
all
as-
the pastors, or if you just say it, you can even just take a guess and say the most important people in the church are at the front and the least important people at the back. But the least important people are the ones that need God the most and they should be at the front. It's the people at the back that have saved, that are good. They should be the ones to then almost be at the back, pushing people forward, talking to people. As people are entering, they should be the one talking and lead them to the front. But no, it's the people that need the most help that are at the back and we forsake them at the back. So that's why I'm saying that culturally within us, because I look at the disciples, obviously I can only draw imagery from what the Bible shows, but the disciples, I just don't ever see it that Jesus was preaching and the disciples were the ones sitting at the front and they left everybody else that needed help at the back. The disciples most likely would have been at the door. They would have been the ushers. They would have been, because they've already received the bread. They want everybody else to receive the bread. So, that's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying it's the pastor's fault. I'm just saying that the way that we have our church set up culturally, we uplift our pastors, sometimes rightfully, but to the point where we just throw them at the front. They get everything, they get the water, they get everything. And even the pastors, they may have not asked for it. But literally, we should be asking ourselves, who needs the altar the most? And those are the people we should be ushering to the front and say, please come to the front, come and receive Christ. Listen to the message.
No, wait. I get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, what I would say, I feel, organizationally, what we have set up in the church right now, I don't have a problem with it. There's the ushering. There is the ushering department that should mirror what the disciples did when the 5,000 to be fed. Jesus was not at the back; he was at the front.
I don't have a preacher preaching.
That's what I'm saying. The pastor is the preacher. So
there are 10 pastors at the front. Not all of them are preaching. It's all right.
There is, if the church has made provision for ushering, then there's a department to undo that.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying.
If there is no
for them being at the front.
The justification for them being at the front is organization.
No, but what's the benefit? Does the church derive any benefit from having those who have received the most bread, those who are spiritually mature, those who least need Christ the most? Not that they don't need Christ, but those who have already been built up and are strong and have received the word that are spiritually healthy.
To be at the front.
What's the justification for them to remain at the front? Well, those that, you know, the problem, one problem you have is that when your pastors and those people who are really the change makers in the church are at the front, they often don't see the people that need help at the back. So if a new member comes and they need help, how can the pastor even know?
So your perspective is that
the preacher can be left, yes. Leadership is scattered in the church.
Not necessarily like
seated in the front. Or giving a special place for pastors.
Okay, let me put it like this. I'm not going to dictate where the pastors or elder men of the church should sit.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should institute a requirement that all pastors must sit at the front.
Okay. All right. Fair
enough. I get what you mean.
Let's move on. Yeah. Okay. One of the points that Lydie made was that as members, we also cause these problems.
Absolutely.
Like we put our leaders and pastors on the pedestal.
Yeah.
You know, and to the point that, like, I think for me, if I look at majority of the way pastors do things, like, it's probably one of the least things I would want to be, because a lot of time I look at pastors and they are like, especially the ones that also wear that kind of clothes. You know, a party is going, people are having fun, people are talking, and then the pastor coming.
Quiet.
You know, I've actually been to a party where I came, you know, early, one of the few times. No, I came early and then everybody was chatting, having fun, you know, and then once the pastor came in, like everybody was just like, yes sir. It just died down. And then until the pastor left. And there's also a thing whereby a pastor cannot be in the party, in the gathering until it finishes. Like they come, say the prayer, go to one or two, and then they go. Even to eat with the people is seen as a problem.
Okay.
There is a lot, I think there is a lot that has come into it that is now actually like a big problem in my view. And I think how we resolve it, you know, it's complex, you know, because there are pastors that go out of the way, you know, to fight that. You know, for example, a pastor might want to clean the toilets after service.
Yeah.
Do you think the pastor in your church will take, broom and brush and wants to clean the toilet? Do you think he'll be able to reach even close to the toilet before someone stops him?
That's another thing. Like, first of all,
personality says a lot. The way the church has organized itself also says a lot.
Yeah.
But I hear what you guys are saying, and
but
it's quite funny.
So would it be a lack of respect for a pastor? The reason I'm saying this is there's someone I followed a while ago, like Billy Akoni, you know, do you know him?
I know him.
You've heard of him, yeah. So he said when they have their meeting with students, this is high school students and all of that, you know, when they have their camp, that is the leaders, is the pastors, the leaders of it, that will go and wash the toilet.
Yeah.
Like they will wash the toilet, and his view was that if this young person know that
I'm going to wash
this, I'm the one that will wash, do you think that they will leave that toilet dirty? Well, after they used it. That was his own, mindset.
Thinking.
So, but people would have to, he would have forcefully want to do that. I think it will be hard for a pastor or a leader to do that now. Two, one, because it's probably the members won't allow it. Okay, yes. And if they do, it's kind of going to be seen as a disrespect. Okay, but number two is also a lot of times leaders' pride. Yeah, the culture. But is there? Yeah.
Look, I don't think there's any. First of all, if we have leaders, hold on, let me step back.
Yeah.
Who is serving us when we're in heaven?
How do you mean?
Jesus said to serve us when we're in heaven. He did not say he has space in his house, in his mansion.
Mm-hmm.
He will make a table for us. Who is serving us?
Yes.
Okay. If Jesus is going to serve his creation, what can we do that is even comparable to that?
Yeah.
That
I mean, he died
Jesus
for
Christ.
us, right?
That's the
That's
biggest
the biggest
thing. So he's
sacrifice.
already laid a marker,
Yeah.
a benchmark for us. So first of all, in the church I go to, I know in fact, I know this one pastor that always stays back, always cleans, always vacuums. I'm telling you, if somebody came to that church because of the way we stereotype pastors, if you see him, you will just say he's not a pastor.
Yeah.
And every time I get a chance, I make sure everybody notices the great work he does.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't do it for recognition,
Yeah.
but he does the work.
Yeah.
There's
because
nothing
it needs
he
to be
cannot do in
Yeah.
behalf. And it's not because he says, I'm a pastor, I have to show an example.
Yeah.
He sees
He's just
it
doing
as-
it from the heart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He sits at his father's
Yeah,
house,
yeah.
and he cannot let his father's house go unclean.
Yeah.
You know, and I know some of our pastors want to do that, but we have members that are like, pastor,
How
doing
can
it,
pastor do
that
that?
cannot be. If it happens,
There will even be an elder where you are sitting there like that and you'll say, look at your face. This person is doing this, can't you see? You know?
Wait.
So that's the problem.
So there's this point I want to make concerning, I understand what you guys are saying, but there's a place of reference also. The congregation will put their pastor in a certain manner. They see their pastor in a certain view. Say you're going to a church, for example, you're going to that church, and every Sunday you see that the pastor is always the one watching the toilet and everything. You see the pastor doing the menial jobs in the church. As a person going to that church, you start wondering, are we referencing this? Are we giving honor to the office of a pastor in this church or not? So sometimes when the people of the church have put that pastor in that place, because you are a person of honor among us, the person also comes to that office and be like, okay, I have to enjoy the honor in this office.
See, that's the problem.
No, wait, now it's not, like, I have to benefit from the honor.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
Benefit.
but the thing is, it does not stop. Say if the person now is saying, okay, I'm going to go aloof, I don't care if whatever happened on the floor, there's a problem. But the person is still contributing and still helping to direct and still engaging, then it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't see a problem.
I think what you're saying, we are not saying that pastors should.
No, I'm just examples.
And a lot of the times, to be fair, pastors don't necessarily do all of that because
there are many things that they do.
So, for example, if a pastor is the one cleaning, if the main pastor anyway is the one cleaning the church after service, how is he going to attend to maybe the special
after yes.
So I think we are not trying to bash pastors here, or we are not trying to say we should be disrespectful. We are just having a place to discuss some of these issues.
Culture.
But you had another point of whereby
there are things that culture debars some saying in the church. Like culture tells like you can't discuss certain things.
Okay.
Whereas the church is your father's house. It's a place to get help. Yet you'll be able to talk about certain things in the church. It took us some time before we start talking about problems in marriages in church. Like a long time. People wanted to talk about it. The church was in a it took, and there are so many other conversations in the church that culture, like we can't talk about that. Politics. We can't go there. Finance. We can't go there. Like, why not? Why not?
Really culture.
Yeah, culture.
Okay, for example, let me even give
Wait.
an example.
If you say it's not culture to disturb politics in the church, the first thing is politics is about leadership, right?
Yeah.
So why are we discussing external leadership outside of the church? It took time for people to educate people in the church that external leadership that you don't want to discuss is what is determining the school, the hospital, the road, everything that you are going to use. If you don't discuss it and start talking about it and get involved, it's going to affect your life.
So this is a continuous. I think it's a continuous conversation, right? Because there will always be a clash. I remember Mount Zion Ministry. If people don't know, it's a Christian drama ministry in Nigeria. And when I watch their start off, like they actually have to fight a battle for them to be able to do drama on the altar for it to be a ministry. So the culture at that time, and culture changes, right? Okay, the culture at that time was that we cannot allow this. This is not
This is
how.
not
But they
doable.
have to fight, and now pretty much almost every churches have a drama
Ministry.
you know. So this is always going to be a challenge, right? And there are certain things, you know, today we've talked a lot about certain things that the culture does, but we are now also talking about certain things the culture does not allow us to do. So even things, for example, like, you know, a child, you know, coming to, you know, preach, you know, in the pulpit, like having a microphone, you know, like, you know, should we have like, you know, dancing department? So there's always going to be a clash, but at the end of the day, and we're going to be wrapping up now, how can we continue to address this conflict? Like, it's clear that culture is pretty much how we do the way of things, right? And the biblical culture, you know, is not how things are now, okay? There's Christ culture and there's a culture of the society, you know, and culture of the society continues to changes, okay? But Christ culture
Stand the same.
it stays. So how do we continue to address this conflict and have a balanced perspective? Olaide?
Yeah, look, I think that culture should be additive to our way of life as Christians, as opposed to fighting or trying to balance it. First of all, we're first and foremost called to be Christ-like. So anything that is culture that is opposing that or diametrically against it, we should not follow as culture. But culture is actually, see, culture is retained wherever you are from. And so wherever you're from, if you take on the life of being like Christ, the culture should just reflect almost like a regional aspect of the way you live your life as Christ. The way you live your life as a Christ. I mean, you look at somebody who is from South America, they live differently to somebody from Africa. They're both Christians, but they may live their life differently. But they all respect Christ the same way. They all respect members of the church the same way. So I think culture should be additive. It should add on to that layer of that Christian life that you live. Anything that opposes, remove it.
Okay. I'll go and then Lewa can go and close the show for us. For me, I think, you know, it's even good that we're having this conversation, okay? And like Olaide said, you know, if you go to Nigeria and you go to China, you see that the way of doing things is different. In Nigeria, maybe we, you know, can eat our spaghetti with, you know, fork. If you go to
So
China,
just quickly, you just remember, right? I mean, a great example is where you have in Africa or even Jamaica, the way they praise Christ is with loud music, but in other places, different cultures, they actually do slower music. So culture is not bad, it just has to be additive. Sorry, please continue.
So if you go to China, they'll use, you know, chopstick. So the most important thing is the food being eaten. At the end of the day, the food is going inside the stomach. So I think we just need to put Christ's culture first, okay? And if there is a clash, we deal with it respectfully, you know, but we still deal with it, okay? So it's always going to be a challenge, but I think, you know, with the help of the Holy Spirit, we can continue, you know, to break those barriers. And even in some cases, there are times when culture helps us to be more Christ-like. You know, I know I've maybe talked a lot about that today, but you know, it's also something to think about.
Culture helps us be more Christ-like.
Like cultural values
That helps us to be more
that helps
Christ-like.
us and drives us. For example, you know, you might have a way of doing things before you become a Christian. When you become a Christian, those things that you have picked up from your culture, you know, can help you, you know, continue your, you know, your Christ life. For example, a Muslim, you know, maybe they can have 5 times prayer, you know, a day, in the morning, wake up. Then becoming a Christian, that time and that discipline that they have practiced,
all true.
it can now
maintain it.
It can now be used in the direction of
Praying.
Christ. Yeah.
Mine will be I'm in charge. Don't let culture hold you from practicing Christ culture. Let's put Christ culture. What I've noticed is when people who genuinely believe in Christ meet each other, no matter where they are from, they always seem alike. because there's a knowledge they have, and then they always seem alike, and they agree. There's a culture
So
that Christ, all those things come into play, and you think,
unity,
and you see it in how they do things, and you will not believe that that person is from Brazil, that person is from Nigeria, that person. But when we begin to see where you say, "Oh, I'm in Nigeria, we don't do this here," we don't. Then you know that it is not really. But if it is really, if the thing is, let's make Christ culture the first, and then any other thing can be an addition to it. And when there is contradiction, let Christ love and Christ culture be the top.
I'm glad that we kind of are on the same pattern.
I know we have to end, but maybe the question that we can leave to people, and even for us to think about, is that I believe most of us understand this. The question is, why don't we do it?
Good question. And we end with that. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. See you next time.